Hello, everyone, and welcome to this audio podcast. This audio podcast as part of a Peritubular scope series. This audio podcast as part of a Spectre compass. This audio podcast as part of a Brigadier orbit, and this audio podcast as part of a Storm Logistics production. So this in this audio podcast, a little bit around the themes that the themes around peer review works from 2000 and peer reviewed and published works from 2012, and looking at looking at sort of the works around the specific themes, the specific themes that have been that had been identified as part of this works. So first and foremost, theme one, looking at coping as a process. So coping is a concept aimed at understanding the multifaceted phenomenon of how humans reason, feel, and act in challenging scenarios. Coping as a method is recognized in literature and has been attenuated as a chief notion in research, uh, adapta- uh, adaptation, and well-being. In the 1970s, an important progress in coping theory and research happened where coping, with its characteristic emphasis, discarded was sort of discarded in support of in support of distinctive understanding which regarded coping as a methodology as a methodology. Coping methods range from one occasion to others in a challenging encounter. This is an observed account of coping as a process. When challenging circumstances are regarded by an individual as refractory to transform emotion focused coping, to transform sorry refractory to transform emotion focused coping outweighs when evaluated as controllable by act problem focused coping prevails. Coping can be a powerful mediator, thus it can fluctuate emotion during challenging encounters. It is thus necessary to establish particular threats or immediate concerns and not have a restrictive concentration and not have a restrictive sort of concentration to illness. If coping is evident over time and across encounters, the trait concept is valid. If coping is as a result of circumstantial influences, the concept or process is the sort of the state concept or process or process is applicable. In around sort of theme two and coping styles. So there are two approaches to coping: a style approach and a process approach. There are numerous confines in both approaches. The style approach does not provide an account of the thorough, precise methodologies or modalities for coping acti- for coping active for coping active during challenging scenarios. So, for instance, what do people think and do when confidence is challenged, or when they feel inadequate to an assignment to which society depends? When there is a danger to well-being, and when there is an irreversible harm, or where there is an irreversible harm or affection is or affection is an important goal as giving signs of rejection or lack of affection, and so on. The identification of patient with long-standing illness or long-standing illnesses is necessary to maintain well-being. The methodology by which people with long-term ailments adjust, and their organization to cope is focused for investigation. The association concerning coping and for example, quality of life or QOL, requires clarification to identify if healthcare professionals, for example, can potentially encourage positive coping processes and reduce urgent unintended hospital admissions, for example, for those with long-standing conditions. In around theme three and coping measurement, the process approach is not typically articulated to bond with an individual who has particular goals and objectives, certainty systems, and a life of ideas, a life and a life array of ideas and societal networks. At the same time, coping process measures can also be far from evocative and helpful if more about an individual is known or unknown in association to coping thoughts and actions in specific contexts. There is a need to try a try there is a need to try and identify coping process measures in a greater outline of an individual's time and methods of connecting to the world. In around theme four, and sort of coping theory and models. So Lazarus's theory in 1966 had drawn a difference among kinds of stress, harm, threat, and challenge. Harm refers to impairment that has previously been done. Threat is the expectation of that which has not yet happened but forthcoming, and challenge results from hardship or anxieties that an individual may feel assured in overwhelming by commendably assembling and thus organizing coping resources. Intrigue in undesirable feelings has also been driven by the amassing body of investigations presenting effects on well-being over a lifespan. Circumstances, or at least how they are interpreted to make them appear more favorable, is referred to as coping. Hanselli's sort of gas sort of model, or the general adaptation syndrome model, can be assumed as a biological analog for coping. Challenges are said to also result in a physiological response. Although in current investigations this hasn't received particular consideration. Indeed, the changes between physical and well-being and sort of stresses are deep and resolve on matters that that for example, even clinical psychologists and well-being professionals have had long understand have had long-standing struggles understanding. Sally also drew a difference between stresses. So, for example, eustress and distress. Eustress is a good form of stress since it is allied with positive feelings and a healthy sort of state. Distress is a negative form and relates to a disturbed bodily state. In this peer review works from 2012, there is an overview in around models and theories, coping models and theories relating to relating and regarding, and sort of just an overview a little bit around this. So there was works as part of the literature one of the earlier works before Hanselli's general adaptation syndrome in 1936 was Walter Cannon's fight or flight sort of works from 1929 and the theory of the model can be referred to the theory of the model around Walter Cannon's work can be referred to as a physiological model bases in around coping, coping and stress. Then Hanselli's sort of works the general adaptation syndrome in 1936, which also can be referred to as a a sort of a physiological coping and stress model. And then works by Moose and Solomon, the emotion, stress, and the emotion, stress, and central nervous system and immunity works between 1964 and 1969, where Moose and Solomon's works from 1964 to 1969. Their works can be referred to also as physiological bases around coping and stress. Then Richard Lazarus's works around how harm, threat, and challenge in around works from 1966, where Lazarus's works from 1966 can be referred to as a psychological basis around coping and or stress. Then there's George Engel's sort of biopsychosocial model or theory, biopsychosocial model or theory in 1977, and the theory can the sort of coping and sort of stress or sort of theory or model a model can be referred to as having as a psychological but also part physiological and psychological sort of basis. And then Folkman works by Susan Folkman between 1985 and 1997 in around positive emotions. The theory and the model in around coping and stress is and was sort of around a psychological basis, or has a psychological basis. Then the neuroimmunology concept, or the PNI concept, from sort of 1997 to sort of 1997 to sort of current in around even sort of in around current sort of times in around current literature, even around current literature, the theory, the coping and stress theory, coping and stress theory, a model can be referred to as a sort of a physiological and a psychological. And then the diathesis stress model, diathesis stress model, much like the psychoneuroimmunology concept. The diathesis stress model had a basis in around coping and stress, and the theory of the model can be referred to as having again sort of works from can be referred to as having a a physiological and psychological basis. That draws this audio podcast to a close. This audio podcast to a close. This has been an audio podcast as part of a Peritubular scope series. This audio podcast as part of a Spectre compass, and this audio podcast as part of a Brigadier orbit, and this audio podcast as part of a Storm Robotics production.